Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves transported back in time, not in some sterile museum exhibit, but right smack dab in the middle of Edo, now modern-day Tokyo, during the height of the Tokugawa shogunate. Imagine the smell of cherry blossoms mingling with, well, less pleasant things from the unpaved streets. You can hear the rhythmic clip-clop of wooden geta sandals, the hawkers shouting their wares, and the distant, mournful wail of a shakuhachi flute. This isn't a tourist brochure, folks, this is life, raw, unfiltered, and frankly, probably not something you'd survive more than a week of if you're used to avocado toast and high-speed internet. Let's just say, dysentery was a real vibe back then. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Let me know in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the rooster's crow, amplified by the close-packed wooden houses. Sunlight streams through the paper shoji screens, painting a soft, diffused glow across your tiny room. The air is cool, carrying the scent of burning incense from a nearby temple. You're lying on a futon, thin and surprisingly comfortable. Congratulations, you haven't been robbed or murdered in your sleep. A small victory. You rise, your muscles stiff from sleeping on the floor. You probably feel a bit bewildered, disoriented, and utterly unprepared for the day ahead. Historians still argue whether the Edo period was truly a golden age of peace and prosperity or just a carefully constructed facade, but either way, you're about to experience it firsthand. Your clothes, a simple cotton yukata, are laid out for you. The material feels rough against your skin, a far cry from the Egyptian cotton you're used to. No time for a shower, though. Bathing is a communal affair, usually done in the late afternoon at a public bathhouse. You'll get used to the intimacy. Or you won't. Either way, survival hinges on adaptation. You slip into your geta, the wooden sandals that elevate your feet above the muck of the unpaved streets. The first step is always the hardest, especially when you realize how uneven the cobblestones are. You trudge outside, and the city assaults your senses. The sheer density of people is overwhelming, a constant throng of samurai, merchants, artisans, and farmers, all navigating the narrow streets with a practiced ease that you sorely lack. The air is thick with the smells of street food, grilled eel, onegi, steaming bowls of noodles, ramen's ancestor, really, and the ever-present aroma of soy sauce. There are vendors hawking everything from calligraphy brushes to medicinal herbs, their voices blending into a cacophony of sound. One common sound you might hear, ironically, is a bell rung by a prisoner on his way to be executed. Nothing like a little foreshadowing to start your day. You notice a samurai striding past, his two swords glinting in the sunlight. He holds himself with an air of authority, a subtle reminder of the rigid social hierarchy that governs Edo society. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, society was rigidly divided into four classes: samurai, farmers, artisans, and merchants, with little social mobility between them. You, my friend, are probably at the bottom. You head toward the marketplace, hoping to find something resembling breakfast. The market is a riot of colors and sounds. Fishmongers display their catches of the day, their scales shimmering in the light. Farmers offer baskets overflowing with vegetables, their faces weathered by years of labor. A group of geisha, their faces painted white, giggle as they purchase sweets. You try to haggle for a rice ball, but your clumsy Japanese and obvious naivete make you an easy target. You're overcharged, but you pay anyway, chalking it up to a learning experience. At least you have something to eat. Turns out, you're also accidentally buying the expired goods that everyone else is actively avoiding. Bon appetit! After breakfast, you wander aimlessly through the city, trying to get your bearings. You pass a group of children playing a game with stones, their laughter echoing through the narrow streets. You see a temple, its ornate roof a testament to the skill of Edo craftsmen. You consider going in to pray for a swift return to your own time, but decide against it. You're not sure what god would be most sympathetic to your plight. You're starting to feel the effects of the heat and humidity. The sun beats down on your head, and your yukata is sticking to your skin. You long for a cold drink, but there are no convenience stores or vending machines in sight. Instead, you find a tea house, a small oasis of calm amidst the chaos of the city. Inside, you sit on a tatami mat and order a cup of green tea. The tea is bitter and refreshing, and the silence is a welcome respite from the noise of the streets. You watch as a tea master prepares the tea with meticulous care, his movements precise and graceful. A traditional tea ceremony was an important part of Edo society, a way to cultivate mindfulness and appreciation for the simple things. The funny thing is, the actual tea tasted like pond scum and cost you half a day's wages. As you sip your tea, you overhear a conversation between two merchants. They're discussing the price of rice, the cornerstone of the Edo economy. Rice was not just a food staple, it was also used as a form of currency. Samurai, for example, were paid in rice stipends. And you're pretty sure you spent the equivalent of 10 pounds of rice on that foul-tasting tea. You also hear whispers of rebellion, of discontent with the ruling shogunate. While the Edo period was generally peaceful, there were occasional uprisings and protests, often driven by economic hardship and social inequality. Things are not always what they seem, and the facade of stability can crumble at any moment. You leave the tea house feeling slightly more refreshed and a little more informed. You decide to explore the outskirts of the city, hoping to find some peace and quiet. You venture into the countryside, where rice paddies stretch as far as the eye can see. Farmers are hard at work, tending to their crops, their faces etched with the weariness of their labor. You see a farmer struggling to pull a heavy load, and you offer to help him. He looks at you with suspicion at first, but then smiles and accepts your offer. You work alongside him for a while, your muscles aching from the unfamiliar exertion. The farmer speaks little, but his gratitude is evident in his eyes. It turns out you're also terrible at farming and nearly flood his rice paddy. He politely suggests you find work elsewhere. As the sun begins to set, you start to make your way back to the city. You pass a group of children playing, their laughter echoing through the fields. You see a couple walking hand in hand, their silhouettes outlined against the setting sun. Despite the hardships and challenges of life in Edo, there is still joy and beauty to be found. You reach the city gates just as they are closing. You hurry through, relieved to have made it back before dark. The streets are quieter now, but still bustling with activity. Lanterns cast a warm glow on the wooden buildings, creating a sense of intimacy and community. You find a small izakaya, a type of Japanese pub, and order a bowl of noodles and a cup of sake. The sake is warm and potent, and you feel yourself starting to relax. You chat with the other patrons, listening to their stories and sharing your own, in broken Japanese, of course. You learn about their lives, their hopes, and their fears. For a brief moment, you feel like you belong. As the night wears on, you start to feel drowsy. You find your way back to your room and collapse onto your futon. You close your eyes, and the images of the day flood your mind. The sights, the sounds, the smells, all of it is overwhelming. You drift off to sleep, dreaming of cherry blossoms, samurai, and the endless possibilities of life in Edo. And you still have about 20 more years of this to look forward to. Okay, here we go. You peel back the futon, a soft sigh escaping your lips. Morning has arrived in Japan, and it's unlike any morning you've probably experienced. The light filtering through the shoji screens is diffused, gentle. It doesn't scream wake up, like your alarm clock back home, but more like whispers, time to rise and greet the day, eventually. You stretch, feeling the slight stiffness in your muscles from sleeping on the floor. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. Or at least your back will eventually stop complaining. The air is cool, carrying the faintest scent of tatami mats and something vaguely floral, maybe from a nearby temple garden. It's a far cry from the aroma of burnt toast and stale coffee you're used to. You swing your legs over the side of the futon and sit for a moment, letting the sleepiness drain from your eyes. This is it. Today, you embrace the traditional Japanese breakfast and morning rituals. No snooze button allowed. First things first, hygiene. The bathroom awaits, a minimalist haven of clean lines and, surprisingly, high-tech wizardry. You approach the toilet with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Yes, it's that kind of toilet. The one with buttons for everything. Warm seat? Check. Bidet functions you didn't even know existed? Double check. The controls are mostly in Japanese, but you figure it out through trial and error. Just be careful which button you press, or you might end up with a surprise shower where you least expect it. Consider yourself warned. After the initial toilet tech adventure, you move to the sink. A small, exquisitely crafted basin awaits, alongside a collection of unfamiliar-looking soaps and lotions. You tentatively try a foaming cleanser that smells faintly of green tea. It's surprisingly refreshing. You splash your face with cool water, feeling a bit more human. In Japan, cleanliness is practically a religion. Think about it: elaborate bathing rituals, meticulous cleaning habits, the entire culture reveres purity. Next up, oral hygiene. This is where things get interesting. Instead of your usual plastic toothbrush, you find a miswak. A what now? It's a small twig, traditionally from the Salvadora persica tree, used for cleaning teeth. You gnaw on the end until it frays into bristles, and then gently scrub your teeth. It's a slightly odd sensation, a bit like chewing on a twig while simultaneously brushing your teeth. It's an acquired taste, to say the least, but hey, when in Japan. While you're scrubbing, you remember that the tradition of oral hygiene is deeply rooted in history. Evidence suggests that people have been using tooth cleaning tools for millennia. Archaeologists have found evidence of toothpicks and chewing sticks dating back to ancient civilizations. And speaking of gnawing on things, it's interesting that in the Edo period, haguro, the practice of blackening teeth, was a common practice among married women and members of the aristocracy. The dye, made from iron acetate, was believed to protect teeth from decay and was seen as a sign of beauty. Historians still argue whether it was a practical measure or purely aesthetic, but it certainly made for a striking visual contrast. Now, with a clean mouth, and possibly a slightly green-tinged one, you're ready for breakfast. The table is already set, a miniature landscape of bowls and dishes. There's miso soup, its savory aroma filling the air. A small bowl of fluffy white rice, glistening invitingly. Pickled vegetables, offering a colorful array of textures and flavors. And grilled fish, its delicate scent teasing your taste buds. You take a deep breath and pick up your chopsticks. Remember the rules: don't stick them upright in your rice, it resembles a funeral offering. Don't pass food directly from chopstick to chopstick, another funeral custom. And try not to stab your food, unless absolutely necessary. It's a lot to remember, but you'll get the hang of it. Eventually. You start with the miso soup. The warm broth soothes your throat, awakening your senses. It's umami heaven, a savory, earthy depth that's oddly comforting. You sip slowly, savoring the flavor. Next, you tackle the rice. It's perfectly cooked, each grain distinct and slightly sticky. You mix it with a bit of the pickled vegetables, creating a delightful combination of sweet, sour, and salty. The grilled fish is next. It's flaky and tender, seasoned with just a hint of salt. You eat it slowly, carefully picking out the bones. It's far removed from the greasy, fast food breakfasts you're used to. This is a mindful meal, a celebration of simple, fresh ingredients. As you eat, you remember that the traditional Japanese breakfast is deeply rooted in the agricultural traditions of the country. Rice has been a staple food in Japan for centuries, and many of the other dishes are designed to complement its flavor and nutritional value. Miso soup, for example, is rich in probiotics, which are essential for gut health. And pickled vegetables provide a variety of vitamins and minerals. All these things combine to make a power-packed meal. There are regional variations in Japanese breakfasts, of course. In some areas, you might find natto, fermented soybeans, which are, well, let's just say they're an acquired taste. In other areas, you might find tamagoyaki, a rolled omelet, or yakizakana, grilled fish. But the basic principles remain the same: a balance of flavors and textures, a focus on fresh, seasonal ingredients, and a mindful approach to eating. And speaking of mindful eating, legend has it that the average Japanese person can tell the difference between at least 30 different types of rice. Don't ask us how. It's a talent that's developed over years of dedicated rice eating. And if you ever find yourself in a staring contest with a bowl of rice, just give up. The rice will win. Every time. As you finish your breakfast, you feel a sense of contentment wash over you. You're full, but not stuffed. energized, but not jittery. You're ready to face the day. You clear your dishes, rinsing them quickly in the sink. The act of washing dishes is a quiet meditation, a simple task that grounds you in the present moment. After cleaning up, it's time for a final ritual: tea. You carefully prepare a cup of green tea, following the instructions you've been given. The hot water steams, releasing the fragrant aroma of the tea leaves. You pour the tea into a small, handleless cup and take a sip. It's slightly bitter, slightly sweet, utterly refreshing. Tea ceremonies, known as chato or shinoyu, are an integral part of Japanese culture. The precise rituals involved in preparing and serving tea have been refined over centuries, and each movement is imbued with meaning. The tea ceremony is more than just a way to enjoy a beverage, it's a way to cultivate mindfulness, respect, and harmony. Fun fact, the first person to popularize tea drinking in Japan was a Buddhist monk named Eisai in the 12th century. He brought tea seeds from China and promoted the plant's health benefits. You savor the tea, letting its warmth seep into your bones. You feel a sense of calm, of connection to the present moment. You're ready to start your day, whatever it may hold. And as you step out into the soft morning light, you can't help but wonder if you should start a traditional Japanese breakfast routine at home. After all, anything is better than burnt toast and stale coffee. But before you get ahead of yourself, remember that mastering the art of the Japanese breakfast takes time and dedication. Historians still argue whether the perfect bowl of rice can ever truly be achieved. And as for the mystery of the talking toilet, well, that's a secret best left for you to discover. Now, off you go. Okay, here we go. Deep breaths. Let's do this. You trudge along the dusty road, sandals slapping against sun-baked earth. The year? Let's just say it's sometime vaguely medievalish, okay? Don't get hung up on dates. Think knights, castles, maybe a dragon or two if you're lucky, though mostly it's just a whole lot of mud. You're covered head to toe in it, actually. You haven't seen a decent bath in, well, let's not dwell on that. Sensory overload activated. Smell of wood smoke stings your nostrils. Overripe manure hangs thick in the air, courtesy of yonder pigsty. Distant sounds of hammering drift from the village, a blacksmith probably forging another sword, or maybe just nailing two bits of wood together. That's more likely. Your destination? Someplace. Any place. Really, you're just trying to avoid ending up back in then, well, let's definitely not dwell on that. Suffice it to say, your last career choice, professional cheese grater, didn't exactly pan out. Talk about lactose-intolerant nightmares. And the splinters, don't even get me started on the splinters. It made you consider a monastery. Now there's a thought. As you approach the village, you notice something peculiar, a group of people huddled around a rather official-looking notice nailed to a very splintery, very crooked post. It's like the ancient medieval equivalent of a job fair, but with less free swag and considerably more potential for dying of dysentery. You decide to check it out. It's not like you have anything better to do. The notice is written in a surprisingly legible hand, someone clearly spent way too much time in calligraphy class, and outlines the various social roles available in this, let's call it community. You squint, trying to decipher the archaic language. Ye old career guidance, you mutter under your breath. Honestly, the options are limited. First, you have the peasantry. Ah, yes. The backbone of society, the salt of the earth, and also the ones most likely to die before their 30th birthday. You'd spend your days tilling fields, tending livestock, and generally existing in a state of perpetual exhaustion. Not exactly a glamorous existence, but hey, at least you'd get to enjoy the checks notes, occasional potato. Historians still argue whether peasant life was a constant grind of misery or if there were moments of genuine joy and community. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in the muddy middle. But the biggest reason for being a peasant? Feudalism. The medieval social hierarchy. You exist to serve a lord and his land. You are his property. Then there's the clergy. Now, this could be interesting. Imagine trading backbreaking work for endless study, chanting, and, well, more chanting. Plus, you'd get to wear really cool robes.
And maybe learn Latin. Bonus points if you become a monk famous for illuminating manuscripts. That's a real job, you know. Some of the most beautiful books in the world were made by monks.
It's thought that many Irish monks took cats as pets because of the cat's efficiency at taking out mice who were eating the books and parchment. The downside, of course, is the whole celibacy thing. Which, let's be honest, would be a huge sacrifice. Not to mention the potential for ecclesiastical politics and, well, let's just say not all clergymen were saints.
Next on the list, the nobility. Ha! As if.
Unless you happen to have a convenient birth certificate stating you're the long-lost heir to some forgotten duchy, this option is about as realistic as finding a unicorn grazing in the town square. You imagine yourself swanning around in velvet robes, attending lavish feasts, and generally lording it over everyone.
A girl can dream, can't she?
One of the perks of being nobility, especially if you're female, is that you can marry into other families, forging alliances, and becoming extremely wealthy. This often meant being married off as a child.
And finally, the artisan.
Now this is where things get interesting. Blacksmith, weaver, carpenter, baker, the possibilities are still limited, but slightly less soul-crushing than potato farming. You'd get to learn a trade, hone your skills, and maybe even make a decent living. Plus, you wouldn't have to deal with the constant, soul-crushing monotony of, looks around nervously, potato farming.
But wait, there's more.
Hidden amongst the official-sounding jargon, you spot a few, shall we say, less conventional options.
A traveling minstrel?
Sounds fun, but your lute-playing skills are currently limited to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star at a barely tolerable volume.
A jester?
You could try, but your jokes tend to fall flatter than a poorly made pancake. I tried to teach a medieval serf about cryptocurrency the other day. He asked what use it was to him if he couldn't trade it for bread. The only way you'd get laughs is if you tripped on your own feet, which, let's be honest, is a distinct possibility. Then there's the mysterious wise woman or hedge witch. Now, this sounds intriguing. Knowledge of herbs, healing potions, and, perhaps, a dash of forbidden magic? The pay probably sucks, but the hours are flexible and you could spend all day talking to your familiar, a talking cat.
The downside?
You'd be constantly suspected of witchcraft by the overly superstitious villagers. And nobody wants to end up tied to a stake while a bunch of torch-wielding peasants scream about your evil deeds. Although, the burning stake thing didn't actually happen as much as people seem to think it did. The Salem witch trials were more of a frenzy of finger-pointing and accusations. Also, the accused were usually hanged, not burned. So, that's comforting? You weigh your options. Peasant? Clergy? Noble, ha! Artisan? Or something else? What's it gonna be? As you ponder your future, a rather colorful character emerges from the crowd. He's dressed in a motley collection of mismatched clothes, carries a tattered lute, and has a grin that could charm the pants off of, well, a medieval peasant, at least. Looking for a new direction, are we? He asks, his voice a gravelly mix of sarcasm and amusement. The world is your oyster, my friend, or, well, more like your slightly off-putting, suspiciously smelling clam. He winks. He introduces himself as Barnaby, a traveling storyteller and purveyor of questionable information. He claims to know the secrets of the ancient Druids, the location of hidden treasures, and the best way to brew a hangover cure that actually works. Apparently, it involves fermented cabbage and a live earthworm. You're not sure you want to know more. Barnaby leans in conspiratorially. Tell you what, he whispers. I'm always looking for a bright, young, somewhat competent assistant. How would you like to join my little, troop? He gestures vaguely to a mangy-looking dog sleeping at his feet. We travel the land, spreading joy, dispensing wisdom, and occasionally getting chased out of town by angry mobs. He pauses, considering you with a shrewd look. Of course, there's the small matter of payment. Which, let's be honest, is mostly exposure and the occasional stale bread crust. But think of the adventures. The romance. The sheer, unadulterated chaos. He grins again, and for a moment, you actually consider it. The thought of leaving this dusty village behind, embarking on a journey into the unknown, it's strangely appealing. You'd heard that King Arthur was not actually a king, but a war chief. Historians still argue whether King Arthur existed. But it sounds better than cheese grating, right? The choice is yours. Will you embrace the familiar comforts of a settled life, or will you take a chance on the unpredictable allure of the open road? The fate of your medieval destiny rests, checks notes, entirely on your ability to make a vaguely informed decision. Well, whatever you choose, I'm going to try and sleep now. Good night. Alright, settle in, buttercups. Let's get comfy, because today, you are a peasant. Not just any peasant, mind you, but a peasant toiling away in the rice paddies of feudal Japan. Breathe in that earthy aroma. Is that fertilizer? Probably fertilizer. Let's just say it's the smell of potential, of sustenance, of hard freaking work. You wake before dawn. Not because you want to, heaven forbid, but because your stomach is rumbling like a sumo wrestler and you have approximately 7,000 things to do before the sun even considers peeking over Mount Fuji. Your house, and I use the term loosely, is a small, one-room affair with a dirt floor and walls made of woven bamboo plastered with mud. Luxurious, it ain't. Your futon, which is basically a thin mattress on the floor, provides minimal comfort, but hey, it's better than sleeping directly on the dirt. At least, you tell yourself that. The first thing you do is stumble outside to relieve yourself. Privacy is a concept that hasn't really caught on yet in feudal Japan, so you just find a discreet bush and get to it. Think of it as connecting with nature. You then splash some water on your face from a nearby stream. Toothbrushes are a distant dream, so you just rub your teeth with your finger and hope for the best. Morning breath? Everyone's got it. Consider it a social leveler. Breakfast is a meager affair, maybe some leftover rice porridge and pickled vegetables. Exciting? No. Nutritious enough to fuel a day of backbreaking labor? Debatable. You eat quickly and silently, because wasting time is a luxury you simply cannot afford. Your spouse, if you have one, is already preparing for their own share of the day's work. Children are a blessing, of course, but also extra mouths to feed, so they're put to work as soon as they're able to toddle. Now, it's time to head to the rice paddies. You trudge along a narrow path, the mud sucking at your bare feet. Shoes? Maybe if you're a samurai. You are not a samurai. You are, remember, a peasant. The rice paddies stretch out before you, a patchwork of flooded fields reflecting the pale morning light. It's actually quite beautiful, in a gritty, sweat-inducing kind of way. Rice, by the way, was so important that it was often used as currency. You could literally pay your taxes in rice. Try doing that with Bitcoin. Your first task is to weed the paddies. This involves wading knee-deep in the muddy water and pulling out any unwanted plants that are competing with the rice. Leeches? Oh, yeah, there are leeches. You just try not to think about them as they latch onto your legs and suck your blood. Think of it as a free bloodletting treatment. Very holistic. As you work, you hear the calls of other farmers in the distance, their voices echoing across the fields. There's a strange camaraderie in this shared hardship, a silent understanding of the burdens you all carry. Around midday, you break for lunch. Another meager meal of rice and perhaps some dried fish. You sit on the edge of the paddy, your back aching, and eat in silence. You might share a joke or two with your neighbors, but mostly you just focus on replenishing your energy. You'll need it. The afternoon will be just as grueling as the morning. Did you know that farmers in feudal Japan often used ducks to help control pests in the rice paddies? It's true. They'd let the ducks loose in the fields, and the ducks would happily gobble up any bugs or insects that were threatening the rice crop. It's an early form of organic pest control. Talk about multitasking. Dinner and pest control all in one. The afternoon brings more of the same, weeding, transplanting rice seedlings, irrigating the fields. The sun beats down on your back, and sweat stings your eyes. You're tired, hungry, and covered in mud, but you keep going. You have to. Your family depends on it.
The daimyo, your feudal lord, certainly isn't going to feed them. He's probably busy polishing his katana or writing bad poetry. Historians still argue whether the lives of peasants in feudal Japan were uniformly miserable.
Some argue that there were periods of relative prosperity and stability, while others emphasize the constant threat of famine, disease, and exploitation. Either way, it definitely was not a vacation. As the sun begins to set, you finally finish your work for the day. You trudge back home, your body aching in every conceivable way. You collapse onto your futon, exhausted. Your muscles are screaming, you stink of mud, and you're fantasizing about a hot bath. Hot baths, by the way, were a communal thing. Public bathhouses were a popular place to socialize and relax, because everyone loves stewing with strangers. But tonight, no bath for you. You are too tired and it's too much effort to heat the water. So, you wash your face and hands and settle down for dinner. More rice, of course. Maybe with a few more pickled vegetables if you're lucky. Conversation is minimal. Everyone is too tired to talk. After dinner, you might tell a story to your children, or perhaps just sit in silence, listening to the sounds of the night. And speaking of the sounds of the night, ever wonder about the nightlife of feudal peasants? Probably not a lot of wild partying, I'm guessing. After a day of backbreaking labor, most people were probably too exhausted for anything more strenuous than snoring. But, hey, I'm sure they found their own ways to entertain themselves. Maybe a little sake, a little storytelling, a little strategic procreation. You know, the usual. Before you drift off to sleep, you offer a silent prayer to the gods, thanking them for the day and asking for their blessings for tomorrow. You know that tomorrow will bring more of the same, but you also know that you are not alone. You are part of a community, a family, a lineage that stretches back centuries. And in that, there is a certain kind of comfort. One quirky thing about feudal Japan? People often shaved their eyebrows and painted them back on higher up on their foreheads. This was considered fashionable for both men and women. Imagine the eyebrow stencils. Talk about a commitment to beauty. It's like a reverse unibrow, but stylish. You close your eyes and drift off to sleep, dreaming of rice paddies, leeches, and the faint hope that tomorrow will be just a little bit easier. Sweet dreams, Buttercup. And while you are trying to sleep, let me regale you with a historical fact: the social hierarchy of feudal Japan was pretty rigid. At the top were the samurai, followed by the farmers, then the artisans, and finally the merchants. Peasants, like you, were considered more valuable than artisans or merchants because they produced the food that everyone needed to survive. But that didn't necessarily mean they had it easy. They were still heavily taxed and subject to the whims of their lords. One last thing, the concept of karma was deeply ingrained in Japanese culture. Peasants believed that their hard work and dedication would eventually lead to a better life in the next life. So, even though their present circumstances were often difficult, they held on to the hope that their efforts would be rewarded in the long run. Consider it an early version of frequent flyer miles, but for your soul. Good night, weary traveler. May your dreams be filled with bountiful harvests and leech-free waters. Right, settle in, friend. Get comfy. We're about to embark on a journey, a slow, meandering river cruise through the land of the rising sun. Not the flashy, neon-drenched Tokyo, but a different kind of Japan, a Japan forged in fire, whittled with patience, and imbued with centuries of tradition. Today, you are the observer, the apprentice, the slightly jet-lagged tourist trying to keep up. And me? I'm your disembodied voice whispering soothingly in your ear as you try not to spill green tea on your pristine white shirt. You trudge along a dusty road in a small, mountain village. The air is thick with the smell of cedar and something else, something metallic and sharp. It's the scent of a forge. You're headed to see a swordsmith, a man whose family has been crafting katana for generations. Before we get there, though, let's briefly delve into the past. The art of swordsmithing in Japan, you see, really took off during the Kamakura period, 1185 to 1333. That's when the demand for high-quality swords exploded, driven by the rise of the samurai class. Of course, swords existed before that, but these swords, these katana, became iconic. And speaking of iconic,
Did you know there's a legend about a swordsmith named Amakuni who prayed to a Shinto shrine for guidance? Apparently, he had a dream where the gods showed him a new way to fold and temper steel. Whether that's true or just good marketing is, well, who knows? Historians still argue whether Amakuni was a real person or a mythical figure, but one thing is certain: Japanese swordsmiths are all about those origin myths. It adds a little je ne sais quoi, wouldn't you agree? Now, back to your sweaty trek. You arrive at a small, unassuming workshop. The sounds of hammering echo from within. Stepping inside, you're greeted by a wave of heat and the sight of a man, stripped to the waist, muscles gleaming with sweat, pounding a glowing piece of steel on an anvil. This is Tanaka-san, master swordsmith. He nods curtly, barely acknowledging your presence, and returns to his work. You observe, mesmerized, as he folds the steel over and over again, a rhythmic dance that seems both ancient and utterly precise. Each fold removes impurities, strengthens the metal, and gives the blade its characteristic grain pattern, the hata. It's a process that can take days, even weeks, for a single sword. And while Tanaka-san sweats over his forge, let's pause for a moment to appreciate the sheer amount of superstition involved in this process. Swordsmiths often purify themselves before working, wearing special clothes and offering prayers to the gods. Some even believe that the spirit of the sword resides within the metal itself. It's a delicate balance between technical skill and spiritual reverence. Imagine your office job requiring daily purification rituals. It would certainly make Mondays more interesting. Once the blade is forged, Tanaka-san begins the process of hardening and tempering. This involves heating the blade to a specific temperature and then quenching it rapidly in water. This creates the hamon, the distinctive wavy pattern along the edge of the blade. It's a crucial step, and one that can easily ruin the entire sword if not done correctly. Too much heat, too little water, and poof, you've got a very expensive piece of scrap metal. I can see Tanaka-san is being careful because you are standing there. And no one likes an audience for failure. Historians still argue whether the exact quenching methods used by ancient swordsmiths have been fully replicated. They had techniques and secrets that were passed down through generations, sometimes shrouded in secrecy and ritual. In the grand scheme of things, the techniques are less secret than the patience. What is harder to get is true patience. The hardened blade is incredibly brittle, so Tanaka-san then tempers it, heating it again to a lower temperature to reduce its brittleness. This requires a keen eye and a steady hand, judging the temperature by the color of the steel. He then polishes the blade, a painstaking process that reveals the beauty of the hamon and the hata. The level of craftsmanship is astounding. Seriously, you try polishing a blade for hours on end. I guarantee you'll lose feeling in your arms. Now, while Tanaka-san works, let's switch gears and talk about another craft, pottery. You find yourself in a tranquil garden, surrounded by meticulously raked gravel and carefully pruned bonsai trees. The air is filled with the gentle sound of a bamboo fountain. You're here to visit a master potter, someone who has dedicated their life to the pursuit of perfect imperfection. The art of Japanese pottery, particularly ceramics, has a long and rich history. The Jomon period, 14,000 to 300 BCE, saw the creation of some of the oldest known pottery in the world. Those first pots weren't exactly winning any design awards, though. More like functional and very primitive. But hey, everyone has to start somewhere, right? You enter a small, rustic tea house. The potter, an elderly woman with hands gnarled and stained with clay, greets you with a warm smile. Her name is Sato-san. She invites you to sit and offers you a cup of matcha. As you sip the bitter green tea, she begins to explain her craft. She believes that pottery is more than just shaping clay, it's about connecting with nature, finding beauty in imperfection, and expressing your inner self. She takes you out back and shows you the materials. You are standing on the literal earth, and she mentions that all pottery comes from the earth. Pretty deep, huh? And speaking of interesting facts, there is a type of Japanese pottery called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer. It's a beautiful metaphor for embracing flaws and imperfections, celebrating the history of an object rather than trying to hide its damage. It's kind of like saying, hey, I broke this thing, but look how awesome it is now. Sato-san takes you to her workshop, a simple, sun-drenched space filled with the earthy scent of clay. She demonstrates her technique, effortlessly shaping a lump of clay on her potter's wheel. Her hands move with a grace and precision that can only come from years of practice. The clay spins, rises, and transforms into a delicate bowl. She's so good. You could never be this good. Historians still argue whether the rise of tea culture in Japan influenced the development of certain pottery styles. The tea ceremony demands specific shapes, textures, and colors. Was it the pottery that inspired the tea, or the tea that inspired the pottery? Chicken or egg? Zen koan for the modern ceramicist. Sato-san then shows you the process of firing the pottery in her kiln. It's a transformative process, turning the soft, pliable clay into a hard, durable vessel. The heat of the kiln can be unpredictable, and sometimes pieces crack or warp during firing. But Sato-san sees these imperfections as part of the beauty of the process. Before you leave, Sato-san hands you a small, imperfectly shaped teacup. This, she says, is a reminder that beauty can be found in the most unexpected places. It's a nice sentiment. You thank her, and you leave. You cradle the cup, careful not to drop it. Now, let's move on to something completely different, paper making. You find yourself in a small village nestled in a valley, surrounded by lush green fields. The air is crisp and clean, and the sound of rushing water fills the air. You're here to learn about washi, traditional Japanese paper. The art of washi making has been practiced in Japan for over 1,000 years. It was originally used for writing, calligraphy, and religious texts, but it has since found its way into everything from lampshades to clothing. The history of paper is often overlooked, but the use of paper literally created civilization. Just think about that for a second. You visit a small, family-run washi workshop. The owner, a kind elderly man named Kimura-san, greets you with a smile. He explains that washi is made from the inner bark of the paper mulberry tree, kozo. The bark is harvested, steamed, and then beaten to separate the fibers. This process is incredibly labor-intensive, but it results in a paper that is strong, durable, and beautiful. The steaming and beating part seems barbaric, but whatever. And speaking of interesting facts, did you know that washi was once used to make samurai armor? The paper was layered and lacquered to create a surprisingly strong and lightweight defense. Just imagine facing down a katana-wielding warrior clad in paper armor. That would be a sight to behold. The future of warfare is paper. Kimura-san demonstrates the process of making washi. He dips a bamboo screen into a vat of water filled with kozo fibers, gently agitating the mixture to create an even layer. He then lifts the screen, allowing the water to drain away, leaving behind a thin sheet of paper. The screen is then laid out in the sun to dry. I bet you didn't do that today, did you? Historians still argue whether the unique properties of washi contributed to the development of Japanese art and culture. The ability to create delicate brushstrokes, intricate patterns, and translucent screens has certainly influenced the aesthetic sensibilities of the Japanese people. And to that end, it did influence the world at large. You watch Kimura-san as he makes sheet after sheet of washi, his hands moving with a practiced grace. He then shows you some of the different ways that washi can be used, from calligraphy to origami to paper lanterns. The possibilities seem endless. You can't wait to get home and make your own paper samurai armor. And there you have it. A brief glimpse into the world of Japanese craftsmanship. The dedication, the skill, the patience, it's all truly inspiring. And hopefully, you haven't fallen asleep yet. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go find myself a nice cup of matcha. Maybe in that slightly flawed teacup. Good night, friend. Or good morning. Or good afternoon. Whatever time it is, sleep well. Alright, settle in, settle in. Let's talk medieval medicine. Or, as I like to call it, medieval? Maybe evil? You trudge through a muddy lane, the stench of unwashed bodies and open sewers clinging to you like a persistent X. The air is thick, heavy, and you can practically taste the disease swirling around. You're not feeling great. A cough's been nagging at you, and you've got this throbbing sensation behind your eyeballs.
It could be anything, really: the plague, a bad batch of ale, or just the general existential dread of living in the 14th century. Either way, you need a doctor. Good luck with that. You finally arrive at the physician's dwelling. It's less of an office and more of a cramped room crammed with jars of questionable substances, dried herbs that smell vaguely of your grandmother's attic, and an assortment of implements that look suspiciously like torture devices. This is it. This is where you put your life in the hands of someone who probably learned everything they know from a slightly deranged barber. The physician, clad in a surprisingly clean, at least, comparatively, robe, eyes you with an air of practiced expertise. He's probably seen it all, from buboes the size of melons to melancholic humors causing excessive gloom. Humors, you ask? Ah yes, the foundation of medieval medicine, the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health, according to these learned fellows, depends on the perfect balance of these bodily fluids. And if you're feeling unwell? Well, clearly one of them is out of whack. Historians still argue whether this theory held any actual sway, or if it was just a convenient excuse for doing whatever they felt like. He circles you, sniffing the air like a truffle hog, occasionally poking you with a surprisingly cold finger. It's unsettling. Finally, he pronounces his diagnosis: an excess of blood. Shocking, I know. What's the cure? Bloodletting, naturally. He grabs a gleaming, suspiciously large lancet. Now, bloodletting was the go-to treatment for pretty much anything. Headache? Bloodletting. Fever? Bloodletting. Stubbed toe? You guessed it, bloodletting. They believed that by draining some of your life force, they were also draining the illness. Side effects may include weakness, fainting, and a slightly shorter lifespan. You sit there, staring at this instrument of doom and wondering if a simple prayer to Saint Sebastian would have been a better choice. He slices. A surprisingly large amount of blood gushes forth into a bowl, pooling like dark, viscous wine. He scrutinizes the color and consistency with the intensity of a sommelier judging a fine vintage. Aha, he proclaims. As I suspected, too much red. You, meanwhile, are feeling increasingly lightheaded. Mainstream historical fact: bloodletting was a common practice throughout the Middle Ages, often performed by barbers as well as physicians. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of going to the quick lube for an oil change, but for your veins. Quirky tidbit: some physicians consulted astrological charts to determine the best time to perform bloodletting, believing that the position of the stars influenced the flow of bodily humors. So, if you were born under a bad sign, you were pretty much doomed. After what feels like an eternity, he finally bandages the wound. You're now significantly paler and weaker than before, but hey, at least your humors are slightly more balanced, maybe. He prescribes a concoction of herbs and spices that tastes suspiciously like dirt and sadness. Drink this 3 times a day, he instructs, and avoid cold air, strong emotions, and excessive thinking. Easier said than done when you're basically living in a low-budget horror film. Of course, bloodletting wasn't the only trick they had up their sleeves. There was also purging, which involved inducing vomiting or diarrhea to, you guessed it, remove excess humors. Fun times. Think of it as a medieval juice cleanse, but way less glamorous and considerably more explosive. But let's not forget the real star of medieval medicine: prayer. Because when all else failed, which was, let's be honest, most of the time, you could always rely on divine intervention. Every saint had their specialty: Saint Roch for plague, Saint Anthony for skin diseases, Saint Blaise for sore throats. So, if you had a particularly nasty rash, you'd better get to church and start praying to Saint Anthony. It probably wouldn't help, but at least you'd feel like you were doing something. And if you were really unlucky, you might end up in the hands of a trepanner. Trepanning involved drilling a hole in the skull. The theory? To release evil spirits or relieve pressure on the brain. The reality? A quick and painful demise. Historians still argue whether trepanning was actually effective in treating certain conditions, or if it was just a gruesome form of torture disguised as medicine. My guess? The latter. I'm thinking it probably wasn't the evil spirits that were causing the brain pressure. Of course, surgery was a bit of a gamble too.
Anesthesia? Non-existent. Sterilization? What's that? Pain management? Biting down on a leather strap and hoping for the best.
Surgeons were often barbers or butchers who dabbled in human anatomy on the side. Amputations were common and performed with a speed that bordered on terrifying. The goal wasn't necessarily to save your life, but to get the job done before you bled out, died of infection, or simply went mad from the pain. On the bright side, you might get a cool wooden leg out of the deal. Mainstream historical fact: monasteries played a significant role in preserving and transmitting medical knowledge during the Middle Ages. They housed libraries filled with ancient texts and often operated as hospitals for the sick. So, if you were feeling unwell, your best bet was to check into a monastery and hope for the best. Sort of like a medieval spa, but with more chanting and less cucumber water. Quirky tidbit: people believed that certain animals possessed medicinal properties. For example, ground-up earthworms were used to treat wounds, and powdered unicorn horn, yes, unicorn, was considered a powerful antidote to poison. Spoiler alert, unicorns don't exist. But that didn't stop people from trying to get their hands on some mythical horn. One wonders what they used to try and cure those delusions. And speaking of delusion, let's talk about the plague. The Black Death. The bubonic plague. Whatever you want to call it, it was a bad time for everyone. Millions died, and the medical community was utterly clueless. They tried everything: bloodletting, purging, prayer, amulets, and even leeching. They used leeches. A lot. Because, if draining some of your blood was good, draining more of your blood must be even better, right? Wrong. One popular theory was that the plague was caused by miasma, or bad air. So, people carried around bouquets of flowers and herbs to ward off the stench and, hopefully, the disease. It's like a medieval version of Febreze, but with a slightly higher chance of triggering allergies. The plague doctor, with their iconic bird-like mask filled with aromatic herbs, became a symbol of the era. The mask was designed to protect them from the miasma, but it probably did little more than make them look slightly more terrifying. Historians still argue whether the plague was caused solely by bubonic plague or if other diseases contributed to the pandemic. Whatever the cause, it was a devastating blow to Europe, wiping out a significant portion of the population and leaving a lasting impact on society. You consider yourself lucky you only have a cough. For now, you suppose. And that, my friends, is just a brief glimpse into the wonderful world of medieval medicine. Brutal? Yes. Ineffective? Often. Painful? Absolutely. But hey, at least they were trying, sort of. You hobble back towards your hovel, clutching your dirt-flavored medicine. Perhaps a good night's sleep, and a strong dose of denial will do the trick. You just hope your symptoms aren't too far advanced before a better solution is proposed. Probably leeches. Actually, never mind. Time for a long sleep. Good night. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk travel. Medieval travel. And, oh boy, are you in for a treat? A treat that probably involves dysentery and possibly getting your head bashed in by bandits. Doesn't that sound relaxing? No? Okay, well, grab your imaginary walking stick, because you're coming with me anyway. Imagine this: you're standing at the edge of your village, ready to embark on a journey. Maybe you're a merchant heading to the next town over to sell your wares, a pilgrim on your way to a holy site, or just some poor sap who got kicked out of their village for, well, reasons. Doesn't matter. What matters is you're about to experience the joys of medieval travel. First things first, forget everything you know about comfortable shoes. Seriously. Those supple leather boots you're picturing? They'll be shredded within a day. You're probably stuck with rough, clunky things, maybe stuffed with straw if you're lucky. And socks? If you have them, they're probably made of wool and perpetually damp. So, you trudge onward, each step a little reminder that life is short, and your feet are already regretting all your decisions. The roads, well, they're not exactly highways. Think more like muddy tracks, barely wider than a cart. Depending on the weather, you might be ankle-deep in mud, slipping and sliding with every step. In the summer, dust kicks up with every footfall, coating your throat and turning you into a human sandpaper dispenser. It's all very picturesque, if you're into that sort of thing. Now, the speed. Forget about zipping along at 70 miles per hour. We're talking a brisk walking pace, maybe 2 to 3 miles an hour if you're really pushing it. You'll be lucky to cover 15 to 20 miles in a day. So, that pilgrimage to Canterbury? Yeah, pack a lunch. Pack several lunches. Pack enough lunches to sustain a small army. But hey, at least you get to enjoy the scenery, right? Well, maybe. If scenery to you means endless fields, dense forests full of things, and the occasional dilapidated village, then you're in for a visual feast. Oh, and let's not forget the smells. Between the livestock, the lack of sanitation, and the ever-present aroma of unwashed bodies, your nose will be working overtime. It's like a sensory overload of unpleasantness. And then there's the company. Unless you're traveling alone, which is generally a bad idea, you're likely to be surrounded by a motley crew of fellow travelers. There's the overly pious pilgrim, constantly droning on about their sins. There's the suspiciously shifty-eyed merchant, clutching their purse a little too tightly. And there's always that guy, the one who can't stop talking and has a truly unsettling laugh. Speaking of dangers, let's get to those, shall we? Bandits were a constant threat. They'd hide in forests or lurk along lonely stretches of road, waiting for unsuspecting travelers like yourself. And they weren't exactly polite about it. A quick stand and deliver was probably the best-case scenario. More likely, it involved a swift club to the head and a thorough ransacking of your belongings. Which, let's be honest, probably weren't worth all that much in the first place. I mean, you're traveling in a time when a loaf of bread was considered a valuable asset. Navigation was another challenge. Maps, if they existed at all, were often inaccurate and fanciful. You were more likely to rely on landmarks, local knowledge, and the questionable directions of strangers. Just follow the river for 3 days, then turn left at the big oak tree. You can't miss it. Famous last words. And let's not forget the weather. Rain, snow, scorching heat, medieval travelers faced it all, with little protection. You might have a cloak, maybe a hat, but that's about it. There were no Gore-Tex jackets or climate-controlled cars. You just had to grin and bear it. And probably catch a cold while you were at it. Now, about food and lodging. Forget about Michelin-starred restaurants and cozy hotels. Your options were limited to whatever you could carry with you, forage along the way, or buy from the occasional roadside inn. And inn is putting it generously. Think more like a dimly lit, flea-infested hovel with questionable food and even more questionable characters. Sleep involved sharing a room with a dozen strangers, listening to their snores and farts all night long. Ah, the joys of communal living. Water was another concern. Clean water, that is. You were more likely to drink from a stream or well, hoping it wasn't contaminated with, well, anything. Let's just say that dysentery was a common travel companion. It was pretty much the medieval equivalent of a frequent flyer program, but instead of miles, you accumulated, well, you get the idea. Now, here's a mainstream historical fact for you. The Silk Road was a major trade route connecting the East and West during the medieval period. It wasn't just one road, but a network of routes spanning thousands of miles. Think of it as the medieval internet, but with more camels and less cat videos. And here's a quirky tidbit: people believed that certain animals could predict the weather, and therefore, help you know the time to travel. Observing the behavior of pigs, for instance, was thought to reveal impending rain. So, next time you see a pig acting strangely, you might want to grab your umbrella. Who knew pigs were such astute meteorologists? Historians still argue whether the benefits of increased trade outweighed the risks and hardships of long-distance travel during the medieval period. Was it worth braving bandits, disease, and terrible food just to get your hands on some spices from the East? It's a question that has plagued scholars for centuries. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. Travel also offered opportunities for adventure, discovery, and cultural exchange.
You got to see new places, meet new people, and learn about different ways of life. It broadened your horizons, even if it also broadened your chances of getting robbed. There were also some practical inventions that made travel slightly less miserable. The compass, for example, helped travelers navigate more accurately. The development of better roads and bridges made journeys a little smoother. And the rise of towns and cities provided more places to rest and resupply. And don't forget about the knights, those armored protectors. Okay, so maybe they weren't always protecting you. Sometimes they were the ones causing trouble. But hey, at least they looked impressive, right? A knight in shining armor is always a sight to behold, unless you're the one he's about to run through with a lance. Here's a joke for you. Why did the medieval traveler bring a ladder on their journey? Because they wanted to go to higher places. Okay, so I told you they were gentle jokes. I mentioned pilgrimages earlier. These were journeys to holy sites, undertaken for religious reasons. Pilgrims traveled to places like Jerusalem, Rome, and Santiago de Compostela, seeking forgiveness for their sins or hoping for a miracle. And they did it all on foot, of course. Talk about dedication. And here's another quirky fact: some people believed that certain diseases could be cured by touching the relics of saints. So, if you were suffering from a bad case of the plague, you might try rubbing yourself against a saint's bone. I'm not sure how effective it was, but hey, desperate times call for desperate measures. Plus, the saint probably appreciated the attention. Historians still debate whether the rise of pilgrimage was driven more by genuine religious fervor or by the desire for adventure and travel. Were people truly seeking spiritual enlightenment, or were they just looking for a good excuse to get out of town? Probably a bit of both, to be honest. But let's face it, medieval travel was hard. It was slow, dangerous, and exhausting. It required a lot of planning, preparation, and sheer determination. But it was also an essential part of medieval life. It facilitated trade, spread ideas, and connected people from different parts of the world. So, the next time you're stuck in traffic, just remember that things could be a lot worse. You could be trudging through mud, dodging bandits, and trying to avoid dysentery. And frankly, that doesn't sound fun at all. One more joke? What do you call a knight who's afraid to fight? Surrender. Okay, I'm really scraping the barrel here. But seriously, the unsung heroes of medieval travel were the animals. Horses, oxen, donkeys, they carried people, goods, and supplies over long distances. They were the workhorses of the medieval world, quite literally. And they deserve a lot of credit for making travel possible. And here's a final quirky fact: some medieval travelers believed that carrying a rabbit's foot would bring them good luck. So, if you happen to stumble across a dead rabbit, you might want to snag its foot. Just saying. Probably not the luckiest thing for the rabbit, though. Historians still debate the long-term impact of medieval travel on the development of European society. Did it contribute to the spread of new technologies and ideas, or did it simply reinforce existing social and economic structures? It's a complex question with no easy answer. Okay, friend, I think we've reached the end of our journey for tonight. You've endured the mud, the bandits, the questionable food, and my terrible jokes. You've earned your rest. So, settle into your comfy bed, appreciate your clean water, and be thankful that you're not traveling in the Middle Ages. Sleep tight, and don't let the bedbugs bite. Or the bandits. Alright, hey there, settle in, settle in. Let's get cozy. The wind's picking up outside, isn't it? Makes you want to curl up under a, well, in this case, probably a straw mat, because we're diving headfirst into the education system of feudal Japan. Yeah, you. You are now a temporal tourist. Congratulations. And don't worry, unlike some time travel scenarios I could mention, looking at you, butterfly effect, your presence here won't unravel the fabric of reality. Probably. So, you're standing in a dusty courtyard, the air thick with the scent of cherry blossoms and manure. Ah, yes, the authentic feudal Japanese experience. Before you is a small, unassuming building. This, my friend, could be one of many things: a terracotta, a temple school for commoners. Step inside, carefully avoiding that interesting puddle. The room is surprisingly bright, sunlight streaming through paper windows.
You see a wizened old man, his face etched with wrinkles that tell tales older than your own house, sitting cross-legged on a raised platform. He's surrounded by a gaggle of children, all diligently copying characters onto their own slates. These aren't iPads, of course. These are usually made of wood, maybe lacquered, and they use brushes and ink. Think of it like a primitive, low-resolution Etch-a-Sketch. You observe the children, mostly boys, though a few girls are present, a sign of the time slowly, well, not evolving, exactly, but at least shifting slightly. Here, they learn basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. Practical skills. Skills that will help them in their future lives as farmers, merchants, or artisans. The Terakoya are fascinating because they weren't run by the government. They were grassroots institutions, often managed by Buddhist temples or local communities. This decentralized approach allowed for a degree of flexibility, adapting to the specific needs of the region. It's kind of like the difference between a massive, soulless corporate chain and a quirky, independent bookstore. Guess which one has more character? Now, don't go thinking everyone in feudal Japan was hitting the books. Most people were, busy trying not to starve. Formal education was a luxury, primarily for the upper classes, especially the samurai. But the Terakoya offered a glimmer of opportunity for those further down the social ladder. A glimmer, mind you, not a floodlight. Speaking of samurai, it's time to leave this charming little school and head on over to a Hanko, a domain school specifically designed for the sons of the warrior elite. Hope you remembered to pack your sword. Just kidding, mostly. You can leave it in your temporal backpack. The Hanko is a far more imposing structure than the Terakoya. Think imposing stone walls, manicured gardens, and an air of serious discipline. You can practically smell the privilege radiating from the place. Inside, you'll find young samurai in training being drilled in a variety of subjects, far beyond simple reading and writing. Here, they learn Confucian philosophy, martial arts, obviously, calligraphy, poetry, and even strategy and tactics. It's essentially a well-rounded warrior curriculum. They're being molded into not just skilled fighters but also educated administrators and leaders. It's like a really intense, medieval boarding school, but with more swords and less trust fund babies. Okay, probably not less trust fund babies, just a different kind of trust fund baby. One of the core tenets of samurai education was the concept of Bushido, the way of the warrior. This code of conduct emphasized honor, loyalty, courage, and self-discipline. You can see the influence of Bushido everywhere, from the rigid posture of the students to the carefully chosen artwork adorning the walls. Historians still argue whether Bushido was a pre-existing, formalized code, or a more amorphous set of ideals retroactively applied. Now, let's talk about something a little offbeat. Did you know that some samurai schools even taught subjects like falconry? Yes, that's right, the art of hunting with trained birds of prey. It was considered a refined skill, a way to connect with nature, and a demonstration of control. Plus, imagine the bragging rights. Oh, you mastered swordsmanship? That's cute. I can command a bird to snatch rabbits from the sky. And just in case you think samurai education was all serious business, there were also elements of performance. Samurai were often expected to be skilled in the tea ceremony, chado. This wasn't just about brewing tea, it was about cultivating mindfulness, appreciating beauty, and demonstrating impeccable manners. Plus, it gave them an excuse to wear really fancy kimonos. You can practically see them whispering snarky comments about each other's choice of fabrics. While Hanko offered a path to advancement within the samurai class, there were other avenues for intellectual pursuits. Many scholars and artists chose to pursue their passions independently, often finding patrons among the wealthy elite. These individuals played a crucial role in preserving and developing Japanese culture. Think of it this way, the Hanko was like a prestigious university, while independent scholars were like the quirky, experimental artists living in a bohemian loft. Both contributed to the intellectual landscape, but in very different ways. Of course, education in feudal Japan wasn't perfect. Access was limited by social class, and the curriculum often reinforced existing power structures. Women, in particular, faced significant barriers to formal education, even within the samurai class. While some women were taught to read and write, their intellectual pursuits were often confined to domestic skills and artistic accomplishments. However, there were exceptions. Some women, like the poet Ono no Kamachi, achieved lasting fame for their literary talents. They challenged the social norms of their time and paved the way for future generations of female intellectuals. It's like they were whispering, "Hey, we have brains too. And we can write better poetry than you, by the way." The emphasis on rote learning and conformity could also stifle creativity and critical thinking. Students were often expected to memorize vast amounts of information without necessarily understanding the underlying concepts. It was like trying to download an entire encyclopedia into your brain without ever actually reading any of the articles. Despite these limitations, education in feudal Japan played a vital role in shaping the country's culture and society. It fostered a sense of discipline, respect for knowledge, and commitment to self-improvement. These values continue to resonate in Japanese society today. And hey, at least they didn't have standardized testing. Can you imagine the stress? The Tokugawa shogunate, which ruled Japan for over 2 centuries, recognized the importance of education in maintaining social order and promoting stability. They actively supported the development of both Terakoya and Hanko, creating a more literate and informed populace. This investment in education helped lay the foundation for Japan's rapid modernization in the 19th century. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? A feudal society, often associated with backwardness and tradition, actually prioritized education in a way that helped pave the way for its own transformation. It's like discovering that your grumpy old neighbor is secretly a world-class origami artist. You just never know. As you step back out into the courtyard, the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the manicured gardens. You take one last look at the Hanko, imagining the countless generations of young samurai who passed through its doors, shaping the destiny of Japan. The experience leaves you with a newfound appreciation for the complexities and contradictions of feudal Japanese society, but also with a strange craving for green tea. Maybe some matcha, too. And as you prepare to return to your own time, remember this: education is a powerful force. It can shape individuals, transform societies, and even, well, allow you to time travel, apparently. Just try not to step on any butterflies. Okay, settle in, friend. Let's keep this little rural reverie rolling. Feels nice, right? Just the gentle rustle of leaves you're probably imagining somewhere, or maybe it's the static from your slightly dodgy headphones, I don't know. Either way, embrace the ambience. So, you've established yourself in the village, you've got, like, a passable knowledge of surviving, and you haven't, yet, accidentally insulted the village elder by mistaking his prize-winning rooster for Sunday dinner. Progress. Now it's time to, gasp, socialize. You trudge toward the village square, which isn't exactly Times Square, more like a dusty patch of slightly flattened grass, honestly. But today, it's buzzing. There's a festival happening, you see. Strings of brightly colored cloth flutter between ramshackle buildings, children chase stray chickens, again, try not to think about Sunday dinner, and the air is thick with the smell of roasting something. You're not entirely sure what, but it smells vaguely edible. Now, you're not naturally a joiner, are you? You're more of an observe from a safe distance with a slightly judgmental expression type. I get it. But listen, you're in this for the long haul. You're not just a tourist, you're becoming part of the tapestry of this little community. So, ditch the judgment, at least visibly, and dive in. Festivals were a big deal back in the day. I mean, duh, right? But seriously, imagine life before Netflix. Entertainment options were somewhat limited. We're talking about a world where the highlight of your week might be watching someone shear a sheep. No offense to sheep shearing, it's a fine craft, but not exactly Game of Thrones. These festivals, these community gatherings, were a vital source of entertainment, social connection, and frankly, an excuse to get drunk. Think of it as medieval happy hour, only with significantly more lute playing. You sidle up to a stall where a woman with surprisingly nimble fingers is weaving baskets. She glances up, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Welcome," she says, her voice surprisingly gentle. "You're new here, aren't you?" She already knows, obviously.
Village gossip travels faster than you can say artisanal sourdough. You admit that yes, you are, indeed, new. She offers you a half-finished basket and gestures for you to try your hand at it. Now, you've never woven a basket in your life. Your crafting skills peak at maybe, a slightly lopsided paper snowflake. But you accept the reeds with a hesitant smile and give it a go. It's harder than it looks. Your fingers fumble, the reeds bend at awkward angles, and the whole thing looks like it's about to collapse into a tangled mess. The woman chuckles kindly. Here, she says, guiding your hands. Like this. She shows you the correct technique, and slowly, clumsily, you begin to get the hang of it. It's surprisingly meditative. You find yourself focusing on the rhythm of the weaving, the feel of the reeds in your hands, the quiet murmur of the crowd around you. And here's a quirky historical tidbit for you: basket weaving wasn't just a practical skill, it was often imbued with symbolic meaning. The specific patterns, the materials used, even the act of weaving itself could be seen as a way of communicating with the spiritual world. In some cultures, baskets were even buried with the dead, filled with offerings for the afterlife. Talk about sustainable packaging. You continue weaving, slowly improving, until you have something that vaguely resembles a basket. It's lopsided, uneven, and probably not strong enough to hold anything heavier than a feather, but you made it. And you know what? You feel proud. The woman smiles, a genuine, warm smile. Good job, she says. You have a knack for it. You highly doubt that, but you appreciate the sentiment. As you move through the festival, you see other activities taking place. There's a group of men engaged in a rather enthusiastic game of something that resembles both wrestling and rugby, which historians still argue whether it was actually a sport or just a socially acceptable way of resolving petty disputes. Either way, you decide to keep your distance. You spot a group of women trading stories and recipes, and, you suspect, gossiping about the aforementioned men. And there's a musician playing a jaunty tune on a flute, his music weaving through the crowd like a friendly, if slightly off-key, spirit. You grab a skewer of that roasting thing, turns out it's goat, apparently, and cautiously take a bite. It's surprisingly good. Chewy, smoky, and seasoned with something that tastes vaguely like dirt and herbs, but in a good way. You chew thoughtfully, watching the scene unfold around you. You're starting to feel like you're actually there, you know? Like you're not just an observer, but a participant. And that's the whole point of community, isn't it? It's about belonging, about connection, about sharing in the joys and sorrows of the people around you. In the grand scheme of things, you're probably just a blip in their lives, another strange face passing through. But for a brief moment, you're a part of their world. And that, my friend, is a pretty powerful thing. Now, mainstream historical fact: communal life, especially in pre-industrial societies, was built on reciprocal obligation. You scratch my back, I'll help you harvest your wheat, you know? Failure to participate, to contribute to the community, could result in ostracism, which, in a small village, was pretty much a death sentence. Not literally, of course. You wouldn't actually starve. Probably. Maybe. Okay, maybe not, but you wouldn't be invited to any parties or weddings, that's for sure. And nobody wants that. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the village square, the festival winds down. People start packing up their stalls, children are herded home by weary parents, and the musician plays a final, melancholic tune. You feel a sense of, well, not exactly sadness, but a quiet contentment. You're tired, your hands are slightly sticky from the goat, and you've got a slightly wonky basket to show for your efforts. But you also feel connected. You notice the village elder, the one with the prize-winning rooster you almost accidentally ate, approaching you. He's a wizened old man with eyes that seem to have seen everything. He stops in front of you and nods slowly. You have joined us, he says, his voice raspy. You are one of us now. Okay, maybe he doesn't say exactly that. Maybe he just grunts something unintelligible and shuffles off into the sunset. But that's how you interpret it, anyway. And honestly, that's all that matters. Because deep down, you feel like you're starting to belong here. You're not just surviving, you're living.
And that, my friend, is a beautiful thing.
Before heading back, though, you must experience one more quirky ritual.
It's specific to this little village. Every resident brings a small stone to the village square on the eve of the equinox and paints it. These stones are then placed around the oldest oak tree in the village to bring good luck and prosperity for the coming season. It's a sweet and simple tradition that adds another layer to your sense of belonging. The oak is the village's focal point, and you're playing a small role in its continued prosperity. You make your way through the village, back to your little hovel. Let's be honest, it's probably more hovel than house. You're thinking about the faces you saw, the conversations you had, the goat you ate. And you realize that community isn't just about festivals and shared experiences. It's about the everyday moments, the small acts of kindness, the unspoken understanding that binds people together. Historians still debate whether the rise of individualism has eroded this sense of community in modern society, but for now, in this little village, it's alive and well. You settle into your straw-stuffed mattress, the lopsided basket sitting proudly on your rickety table. You close your eyes, and you can still hear the faint echoes of the music, the laughter, the murmur of voices. And you smile. Because you're not just surviving, you're thriving. And that, my friend, is something to celebrate. It's also something to be thankful for. You are learning, growing, and expanding your horizons. You've embraced the village life and are beginning to find a rhythm and a sense of peace that you may not have known you were missing. Okay, one little joke before we wrap things up. What do you call a lazy kangaroo? Pouch potato. I'm here all week, folks. Alright. We'll wrap this up for now, yeah? You've done great. You've woven your basket, eaten your goat, and maybe, just maybe, started to become a part of this strange and wonderful little world. Now, close your eyes. Focus on the sound of my voice. Imagine the warm glow of the fire, the gentle breeze rustling through the trees, the feeling of belonging. And remember, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you're always connected. Sleep tight. Alright, settle in, get comfy. Let's talk health. No, not your New Year's resolution health, the health of, like, civilizations. You know, that stuff you vaguely remember from history class while you were drawing mustaches on the portraits? Good. You're probably thinking of ancient Rome, right? Gladiators, conquering, public baths, and lead poisoning. You're not wrong. Romans were all about aqueducts, but those aqueducts were lined with lead. And lead, well, it doesn't really do the old brain any favors. So picture emperors making decrees based on, well, imagine the dumbest thing you can think of and then add lead. You're probably pretty close. It's a wonder they conquered anyone at all. But their healthcare wasn't all bad. They had hospitals, believe it or not. Military hospitals were especially advanced, largely because keeping soldiers alive was pretty crucial for, conquering and all that. They even used surgical tools. You'd probably be less keen if you knew these tools weren't always sterile. Let's just say germ theory wasn't exactly trending. Did you know they used to think that illnesses were caused by imbalances in the body's humors? Think blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much blood? Bleed M. Too much phlegm? Well, I'm not sure what they did about that, but it probably involved something equally unpleasant. Historians still argue whether the humoral theory set back medical progress significantly, or whether it just delayed the inevitable rise of actual medicine. Either way, yikes. Okay, enough about Rome. Let's hop over to ancient Egypt. Now, those guys were obsessed with death, which kind of makes them experts on life, right? Mummification was their specialty, and while it might seem a little morbid, it gave them a pretty decent understanding of anatomy. They knew where your organs were, at least after you were done with them. You almost have to wonder if they picked up a spare heart or lung every now and then. Oops, dropped it in the canopic jar, oh well. They had doctors, too. And some of them were specialists. Like, hey, I'm the nose doctor. I only deal with noses. Don't come to me with your foot problems. Very niche. Very professional. Also, I wonder if the nose doctor ever got bored. They also used a surprising amount of natural remedies.
Honey was a big one.
They used it to heal wounds, which, turns out, is actually pretty effective.
Honey's got antibacterial properties.
Good job, ancient Egyptians. You inadvertently stumbled upon something useful.
I guess that explains Cleopatra's beauty secrets, huh? Just slather yourself in honey and wait for the royalty to show up. I wonder what would happen if you tried that these days.
Just a sticky situation, probably.
Speaking of sticky situations, ever heard of trepanation? It's basically drilling a hole in your skull. Yeah, you heard me. People did this in ancient times. The Egyptians did it, too. Why? Well, the theory was that it would release evil spirits or relieve pressure in the brain. Or, just give you a really bad headache. The fringe theory is that it was a practice designed to induce altered states of consciousness, a kind of ancient psychedelic trip. I guess if you're bored of papyrus, you might want to drill a hole in your head. Personally, I'd stick to Netflix. Now let's fast forward a bit to the medieval period.
Knights, castles, the Black Death, fun times.
Actually, not fun. At all.
The Black Death was a plague that wiped out a huge chunk of Europe's population.
We're talking millions of people.
And, medicine wasn't exactly at its peak back then.
So, what did they do? Well, they tried everything. Bloodletting, again. Praying, obviously.
And, my personal favorite, wearing amulets made of, well, who knows what. Probably something that smelled vaguely offensive. One charming remedy involved strapping a live chicken to a bubo, the swollen lymph nodes that were a hallmark of the plague. The theory was that the chicken would absorb the disease.
Poor chicken. Though I guess it's a step up from just dying of the plague yourself. It reminds me of that old joke. What did the plague doctor say to the chicken? I'm going to need you to take one for the team, buddy.
They also had plague doctors. These guys dressed in these creepy outfits with long-beaked masks. The masks were filled with herbs and spices to ward off the plague.
Did it work? Probably not. But did it look cool? Absolutely. Imagine walking around town in that getup today. Instant influencer status.
Interestingly, the Black Death, as devastating as it was, did have some positive side effects. It led to labor shortages, which meant that the surviving peasants could demand higher wages. So, silver linings and all that.
Historians still debate whether the Black Death fundamentally altered the course of European feudalism.
But it's safe to say it was a pretty big deal.
Kind of like that time you accidentally deleted your entire term paper. Moving along, let's talk about traditional Chinese medicine. Acupuncture, herbal remedies, Tai Chi, sounds relaxing, right? Well, acupuncture involves sticking needles into your skin, so maybe not entirely relaxing.
But it's been around for thousands of years, and people swear by it. The belief is that it balances the flow of qi, your body's vital energy.
If your qi is out of whack, you get sick. Makes sense, right?
I mean, it's as good of a theory as any I've heard today.
One of the more unconventional practices in traditional Chinese medicine is the use of animal parts. Bear bile, rhino horn, tiger bones. These things are believed to have medicinal properties.
Which, is great for the people using them, but not so great for the bears, rhinos, and tigers. This practice has led to serious conservation concerns, and it's a good reminder that, sometimes, tradition should be questioned.
Plus, wouldn't you rather just take a nap than ingest ground-up tiger bone?
Seriously, prioritize self-care.
The Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine is a foundational text of traditional Chinese medicine.
It's basically a giant instruction manual for how to keep your qi flowing. And, it's been around for centuries, so it must be doing something right.
I can't even keep a houseplant alive for more than a month.
Now, let's hop continents again and explore the medical practices of the Incas. These guys were building massive empires in the Andes Mountains long before the Spanish arrived. And they were surprisingly skilled surgeons. They even performed cranial surgeries with a success rate that rivals some medieval European practices.
Seriously. They used coca leaves as an anesthetic, which, hey, if you're going to get surgery, you might as well be high, right? They also used natural antiseptics to prevent infection. And they were really good at setting broken bones. They were basically the orthopedic surgeons of the Andes. One little known fringe tidbit is the possibility that the Incas may have practiced organ transplantation, although evidence remains circumstantial. Imagine getting a new heart in the middle of the Andes. Talk about a transplant vacation. Inca beliefs about health were closely tied to their religious beliefs. They believed that illness was caused by imbalances in the spiritual world. So, if you were sick, you needed to appease the gods. Usually through offerings. I guess that's one way to get good health insurance. Hey, Zeus, I offered you a llama, can I get a checkup now? Alright, one last stop on our world tour of historical healthcare, early Islamic medicine. During the Islamic Golden Age, scholars made significant advances in medicine. They translated and preserved many of the ancient Greek and Roman medical texts. They also made their own discoveries. Al-Razi, a Persian physician, was one of the first to differentiate between smallpox and measles. A truly groundbreaking discovery. Now, that's a resume booster. Islamic hospitals, known as Bimaristans, were some of the most advanced in the world. They had separate wards for different diseases, pharmacies, and even libraries. And they treated patients of all religions and social classes. Kind of the opposite of my last visit to the dentist. They also emphasized hygiene and sanitation, which was a pretty big deal back then. Imagine, clean hospitals. What a concept! One quirky fact, they used music therapy to treat mental illnesses. I guess listening to soothing melodies is better than getting bled. I suppose now it's the equivalent of listening to lo-fi while trying to write a term paper. Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna, wrote the Canon of Medicine, which became a standard medical text for centuries. It covered everything from anatomy to pharmacology. It was basically the medical Bible of the Middle Ages. Historians still debate whether Ibn Sina's contributions were truly original, or whether he primarily synthesized existing knowledge. Either way, his book was a bestseller. Move over, Dr. Oz. So, there you have it, a whirlwind tour of health and medicine through the ages. It's fascinating to see how different cultures approached healthcare, and how much our understanding of the human body has evolved. And also how much stayed the same, like bloodletting. Seriously, what's the deal with bloodletting? Anyway, hopefully, you learned something new, and maybe even chuckled a little. And more importantly, I hope you didn't fall asleep. If you did, don't worry, just rewind. I won't be offended. Promise. Alright, friend, lean back, adjust your headphones, and let's dive into the fascinating world of law and justice. Yeah, I know, sounds thrilling, right? Like a triple espresso before bedtime. But trust me, there's some seriously weird and wonderful stuff hidden beneath all the legal jargon and gavel banging. You trudge up the seemingly endless steps of the courthouse. It's imposing, isn't it? All those columns, the stern-faced statues, it's designed to make you feel small, insignificant, like your chances of winning your parking ticket appeal are about as good as finding a unicorn riding a scooter. But don't let it intimidate you. Remember, justice is supposed to be blind, which means it's probably tripping over those steps right now, too. The air inside is thick with a strange mix of stale coffee, anxiety, and desperation. You take a seat on the hard wooden bench, trying not to fidget. You scan the room. The clock on the wall ticks with an almost aggressive rhythm, each second echoing the potential cost of your little transgression. Was it worth parking in that fire lane for 5 minutes to grab that perfect donut? You reconsider your life choices, and whether you should have just opted for the glazed one. You see a lawyer talking intently to their client, whispering secrets behind a carefully manicured hand. The client looks pale and stressed, clinging to the lawyer's every word like a life raft in a stormy sea. You wonder what kind of legal pickle they're in. Maybe they forgot to pay their taxes, maybe they got caught trying to smuggle squirrels across state lines. Who knows? People get into the darndest situations. Did you know that, back in ancient Mesopotamia, they had the Code of Hammurabi? one of the earliest known examples of written law. It's famous for its eye for an eye philosophy. Which sounds fair, until you realize that means if you accidentally poke someone's eye out, your eye was on the line. Suddenly, that fire lane ticket doesn't seem so bad, does it? Although, there was this one time I accidentally watered my neighbor's cat when they asked me to water their plants. I shudder to think what Hammurabi would have to say about that. You shift uncomfortably on the bench. Waiting is the hardest part, isn't it? The anticipation, the uncertainty, it gnaws at you. You start people watching. There's the bailiff, looking bored out of his skull, flipping through a magazine. There's the court reporter, fingers poised above the keyboard, ready to transcribe every word. They've probably seen it all. The tragic, the absurd, the downright bizarre. You overhear snippets of conversations. Breach of contract. Aggravated assault. Unauthorized use of a library card. Okay, maybe that last one was just you fantasizing, but you get the idea. The legal system deals with everything. From the mundane to the monumental. Here's a quirky thought: in Switzerland, it's illegal to own just one guinea pig. Apparently, they're social creatures and get lonely if they don't have a friend. So, if you're planning a trip to Switzerland and you're thinking of getting a guinea pig, make sure you get two. Otherwise, you could find yourself on the wrong side of the law. Your name is finally called. You stand up, feeling your knees wobble slightly. You take a deep breath and walk towards the courtroom, trying to project an air of confidence that you definitely don't possess. The courtroom is surprisingly small. It's less dramatic than you expected. No sweeping staircases, no dramatic lighting, just a rectangular room with a judge sitting behind a raised bench. You take your seat, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on you. You clear your throat and prepare to make your case. You present your defense, explaining, as calmly as possible, the extenuating circumstances that led you to park in the fire lane. You were only gone for 5 minutes, you were getting a donut for a starving child, you were saving a kitten from a burning building. Okay, maybe you embellish a little bit. But hey, every little bit helps, right? The judge listens patiently, occasionally nodding or making a note. They seem impartial, professional, and slightly world-weary. You can almost feel their thoughts: just another Tuesday morning. You know, the idea of judges as these unbiased arbiters of justice is something that's been around for centuries. But historians still argue whether judges are truly objective, or if their personal biases and experiences inevitably influence their decisions. Can anyone really be completely neutral? After you finish, the prosecution has a chance to respond. They present their arguments, citing parking regulations and emphasizing the importance of keeping fire lanes clear. They make you sound like a menace to society, a donut-crazed outlaw who threatens the safety of the entire community. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. The judge considers everything. They pause for a moment, then deliver their verdict. You hold your breath, bracing yourself for the worst. And you get a reduced fine. You're not completely off the hook, but it's significantly less than the original ticket. You feel a wave of relief wash over you. You thank the judge, resisting the urge to hug them. As you leave the courthouse, you feel a little bit wiser, a little bit more aware of the complexities of the legal system. You've stared into the cold, unblinking eye of justice, and you've emerged relatively unscathed. One last quirky tidbit before we wrap up: did you know that in some countries, animals can be put on trial? Seriously. In the Middle Ages, there were documented cases of pigs, dogs, and even insects being formally accused of crimes and subjected to legal proceedings. Imagine the cross-examination. Mr. Pig, can you explain your whereabouts on the night of the truffle theft? You head back to your car, careful to park in a designated spot this time. You drive away, feeling grateful that your run-in with the law was relatively minor. You think about all the other people who are currently navigating the legal system, facing much more serious challenges. You realize that justice is a complex, often imperfect, process. But it's a process that's essential for maintaining order and protecting our rights. And that, my friend, is a little glimpse into the world of law and justice. It's not always glamorous, it's not always fair, but it's always fascinating. Even if it's just about a donut and a fire lane. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's just sink into this comfy chair of history, shall we? A nice cuppa might be in order, though I'm not sharing mine. Sip. Ah, that's the stuff. Now, where were we? Oh yes, entertainment. Because even back in the day, people needed a distraction from, dying of dysentery. You find yourself with an afternoon to spare, a rare luxury in these historical times. The fields are tended, the chores are mostly done, we're not judging your historical work ethic, and the sun is actually shining. What to do? Well, your options aren't exactly Netflix and chill. But they're interesting. Let's start with the obvious, the arts. We're talking music, of course. Before Spotify, before even the phonograph, there were instruments. Lutes, harps, flutes, you name it, they probably had a crude version made of wood and animal gut. You might find yourself at a local gathering, perhaps a harvest festival, where a wandering minstrel is regaling the crowd with tales of daring knights and tragic romances. You try to sing along, but quickly realize you only know the chorus, and your historical vocal skills are lacking. You stick to clapping politely. You'd think that music tastes were fairly homogeneous back then, but that's just not true. Different regions, different social classes, they all had their own styles. You might hear a Johnny folk tune in the village square, then a more refined, almost mournful melody drifting from the windows of the local lord's manor. It's kinda like the difference between listening to country music at a dive bar and attending an opera. Though, let's be honest, even the opera back then was probably a little rustic. And speaking of rustic, let's talk about dance. You've probably seen those historical dramas where everyone's waltzing around in elaborate costumes. And sure, that happened. But for the common folk, dancing was a much more spirited affair. Think circle dances, jigs, lots of stomping and clapping. Picture a slightly inebriated peasant trying to keep up with the music, and you're pretty close to the mark. In fact, alcohol was often considered an integral part of the entertainment. Shocking, I know. Now, you might be thinking, okay, music and dancing. Pretty standard stuff. But there were other, less conventional forms of entertainment, too. Bear baiting, for example. Charming. This involved chaining a bear to a post and letting dogs attack it. For entertainment. I know, right? The bears weren't exactly thrilled about it, unsurprisingly. Historians still argue whether this kind of violent spectacle represented a brutalizing influence on the public, or whether it actually served as a twisted form of social catharsis. And if that wasn't your cup of tea, and frankly, it shouldn't be, there were other options. Jousting tournaments were incredibly popular, especially among the nobility. Picture knights in shining armor, clashing lances, horses galloping. It was basically medieval NASCAR, but with more potential for actual death. You stand on the sidelines, wincing as a particularly brutal blow sends a knight tumbling from his horse. You're pretty sure you just saw his soul leave his body. Time for a snack, maybe? But let's say all that spectacle is a little much. You prefer something a little more intellectual. Well, there were always games. Chess, for example, was a favorite pastime of the wealthy. It was seen as a way to demonstrate your strategic thinking, your intelligence, your overall superiority to everyone else. You try to play a game, but your opponent keeps moving the pieces in ways that seem unconventional. You suspect he's cheating, but you're not entirely sure of the rules yourself. It's like playing Calvin ball, but with slightly higher stakes. Then you have your board games, dice games, card games. Many of them have been lost to time, their rules and strategies forgotten. Which is a shame, because some of them sound incredibly bizarre. There's one game called Fox and Geese where one player tries to trap the other's pieces, but the rules are so convoluted that nobody really understands how it's supposed to be played. It's like trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions. And for the more athletically inclined, there were sports. But these weren't exactly the organized sports we know today. More like organized chaos. Hurling, for example, was a popular game in Ireland. It involved two teams trying to get a ball into the other team's goal using sticks. The rules were flexible, shall we say? And injuries were common.
You watch a game and are fairly certain you witnessed several acts of attempted manslaughter.
But sometimes, the best entertainment was the simplest.
Storytelling, for example. Gathering around a fire, listening to tales of heroes and monsters, of faraway lands and magical creatures. It's like the historical version of binge-watching your favorite fantasy series. You close your eyes, and let the storyteller's voice transport you to another world. And for a little while, you forget about the hard work and the everyday struggles. You can't discount the power of a good joke, either. Humor, even back then, was a vital part of social life. Jesters were employed in royal courts to provide entertainment, often using satire and wit to poke fun at the powerful. They were basically the medieval equivalent of stand-up comedians, but with a slightly higher risk of getting their heads chopped off. You try to tell a joke you heard from one of the local farmers, but it doesn't quite land. The punchline gets lost in translation, or maybe it just wasn't that funny to begin with. Either way, you decide to stick to listening. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds quaint. But what about the really weird stuff? And to that, I say, you're in luck. Because history is full of weird stuff. Take, for example, the practice of watching the anchoress. An anchoress was a woman, usually, who voluntarily enclosed herself in a small room, often attached to a church, for the rest of her life. People would come to the window of her cell to seek advice or simply to watch her. It was like the medieval version of a reality TV show, but with significantly less drama, and significantly more prayer. You wonder what kind of advice an anchoress could actually offer, given that she hasn't seen the outside world in decades. Maybe she just tells everyone to pray more. Or consider the phenomenon of animal trials. Yes, you read that right. Animals were sometimes put on trial for crimes they allegedly committed. Pigs were particularly popular defendants, for some reason. A pig might be accused of attacking a child, for example, and would be brought before a court, where lawyers would argue its guilt or innocence. It's the historical version of Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, but with farm animals. You imagine trying to cross-examine a pig. Mr. Pig, can you tell us where you were on the night of the incident? Let's not forget about the bizarre rituals and superstitions that permeated everyday life. People believed in all sorts of things, from the power of amulets to ward off evil spirits, to the ability of certain plants to cure diseases. You watch an old woman perform a strange ritual over a sick cow, chanting incantations and waving a bundle of herbs. You're not sure if it's going to work, but you can't deny that it's entertaining. Historians still argue whether these types of unusual customs indicate a population gripped by irrational fear, or whether they represent a rational response to a dangerous and unpredictable world. It probably depends on whether or not the cow gets better. And then there are the holidays. Festivals were a time for celebration, for feasting, for letting loose and forgetting about your troubles. May Day, for example, was a popular holiday in many parts of Europe. It involved dancing around a maypole, crowning a May Queen, and generally engaging in merriment. You join in the festivities, feeling a strange sense of connection to the people who celebrated this holiday centuries ago. You almost forget that you're living in the past, surrounded by people who have no idea what a smartphone is. Almost. So, there you have it. A glimpse into the world of entertainment and leisure in historical times. It wasn't always glamorous, it wasn't always sophisticated, but it was certainly interesting. And who knows, maybe you even learned something along the way. Or maybe you just fell asleep. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the ride. I would not be offended if you wanted to stay right here and listen some more. I am nothing if not at your disposal. If you desire, we can keep going. Alright, settle in, friend. Let's talk about disaster. Because, let's be honest, disaster is always a possibility. You're scrolling through TikTok, doom scrolling through Twitter, catching up on the latest existential dread, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a tiny little voice is whispering, what if? You trudge through your day, the sun warm on your skin, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves, idyllic, really. But what if that gentle breeze picks up? What if that warm sun becomes a relentless scorch? What if the ground beneath your feet decides to, well, rearrange itself? You know, back in 1755, Lisbon experienced an earthquake so powerful, it triggered a tsunami and a massive fire.
Talk about a triple threat. It basically leveled the city.
It was a real turning point, actually, in how we started thinking about risk and urban planning.
Like, hey, maybe building everything out of wood on a fault line isn't the best idea? You're probably thinking that kind of thing is rare, right? Not necessarily.
Now, I read this thing once, and I can't remember where, of course, because my brain is basically a sieve filled with half-remembered cat memes, that suggested there's a direct correlation between major historical events and solar flares. The theory is that these flares mess with the Earth's magnetic field, which somehow influences large-scale social unrest.
I mean, it sounds wild, right?
But it's a fun little fringe theory to ponder. Plus, it's a great conversation starter at parties, just be prepared for the eye rolls. You blink slowly, the weight of impending doom settling ever so slightly on your shoulders. But hey, don't get too gloomy.
We're not just here to wallow in the potential for catastrophe, we're here to prepare. Think of it as proactive pessimism. Or, just plain old preparedness. It's like having an umbrella, you might not need it, but you'll be glad you have it when the sky decides to throw a tantrum. You reach for your phone, scrolling through emergency preparedness websites, your eyes glazing over from the sheer volume of information. Where do you even start? Food? Water? A fortified bunker stocked with canned goods and a lifetime supply of bubble wrap? Okay, maybe not the bubble wrap. Or maybe you suddenly remember your neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He's the guy who spends his weekends meticulously organizing his garage, labeling every single item with painstaking detail. He's also the guy with the suspiciously large antenna on his roof. Rumor has it he's a ham radio enthusiast, which, let's be honest, sounds like something straight out of a Cold War movie. But hey, in a disaster situation, Mr. Henderson might just be your best friend. It's true, though. Ham radio operators have been crucial in providing communication during emergencies for, well, basically as long as ham radios have existed. When cell towers go down and the internet vanishes into the digital ether, those folks with their clunky equipment can still get messages out. It's like having a technological pigeon post, which, admittedly, sounds way cooler than ham radio operator. You yawn. It's getting late, and the sheer scope of potential disasters is making you feel like you need a nap. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, wildfires, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, the list goes on and on. It's a veritable buffet of apocalyptic possibilities. Historians still argue whether the collapse of the Bronze Age was caused by a single, massive disaster or a series of interconnected events. Some point to evidence of widespread drought and famine, while others suggest that invasions and political instability played a more significant role. Either way, it serves as a chilling reminder that even the most advanced civilizations can crumble under the weight of unforeseen circumstances. You picture yourself in the midst of one of these scenarios. A flash flood rips through your neighborhood, carrying cars and debris like toys in a bathtub. A wildfire engulfs the surrounding hills, turning the sky a terrifying shade of orange. An earthquake shakes the ground, causing buildings to sway and crumble like sandcastles. You're stuck, panicked, and completely unprepared. Now, hold on. Let's rewind that a bit. Let's imagine you are prepared. You have a go bag packed with essential supplies, water, non-perishable food, a first aid kit, a flashlight, a radio, a whistle, and a multi-tool. You know your evacuation routes. You've communicated a plan with your family. You know where to meet if you get separated. You've even practiced a few basic survival skills, like starting a fire and building a shelter. Suddenly, the apocalypse doesn't seem quite so daunting. You might even feel a strange sense of excitement. Not that you want a disaster to happen, of course. But there's a certain thrill in knowing that you're capable of handling whatever comes your way. It's like being a character in a survival movie, only instead of running from zombies, you're calmly navigating the aftermath of a natural disaster. It's not for everyone, though. My sister loves the apocalypse genre in movies, but she hates camping. Go figure. You remember reading something about ancient mariners using cats to predict the weather. Seriously. Apparently, if a cat started frantically washing itself, it was a sign of an impending storm. I have 2 cats, and they are always washing themselves. I'm not sure if this means the apocalypse is coming, or if they are just particularly fastidious. I hope it's the latter. You take a deep breath, the weight of the world, or at least, the potential for its imminent destruction, lifting slightly. You realize that preparedness isn't about living in fear, it's about empowering yourself to face whatever challenges life throws your way. It's about taking control of your own destiny, even in the face of the unpredictable. You might even start to see the potential for community in disaster. When things fall apart, people tend to come together. Neighbors help neighbors, strangers offer assistance, and a sense of shared purpose emerges from the chaos. It's in these moments of crisis that the best of humanity often shines through. It's like a giant, involuntary potluck, only instead of bringing casseroles, everyone brings their skills and resources to the table. You think about the small acts of kindness you've witnessed in the aftermath of disasters, a firefighter rescuing a stranded animal, a volunteer handing out blankets to displaced families, a group of people clearing debris from a flooded street. These moments, though often overshadowed by the scale of the devastation, offer a glimmer of hope and a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. You smile slightly, feeling a little more optimistic. You're just gonna keep canned peaches in the go bag. Why? Because it's the best. It makes you think about the Great Molasses Flood of 1919 in Boston. A giant tank filled with molasses burst, sending a wave of sticky goo through the streets at a reported 35 miles per hour. It killed 21 people and injured 150. It's such a bizarre and almost comical disaster. I mean, imagine being swept away by a wave of molasses. At least you'd die with a sugar rush. You remember that you haven't checked the batteries in your smoke detectors in months. You make a mental note to do that tomorrow. You should probably also restock your emergency kit. And maybe learn a little bit about basic first aid. You know, just in case. You glance at the clock. It's getting late, and the glow of the screen is starting to strain your eyes. You decide to call it a night. As you drift off to sleep, you dream of surviving the apocalypse with your cats by your side, armed with a go bag, a ham radio, and a healthy dose of proactive pessimism. The thought is strangely comforting. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be ready. Okay, well, maybe. Okay, let's get cozy and dive into the fascinating world of Japanese spirituality, shall we? Just imagine settling into a comfy armchair, maybe with a cup of chamomile tea, decaf. Of course, we don't want anyone getting too excited, and let's gently wander through the beliefs and practices of Shinto and Buddhism in Japan. You find yourself standing at the foot of a towering torii gate, its vermilion paint practically glowing under the dappled sunlight filtering through ancient cedar trees. This isn't just any gate, it's a gateway, a symbolic transition from the mundane world to the sacred realm of the kami. Feel the cool, damp earth beneath your feet as you pass through. The air suddenly feels different, somehow lighter, cleaner. You're entering a Shinto shrine. Shinto, meaning the way of the gods, is deeply rooted in the Japanese landscape and culture. It's less a codified religion with strict doctrines and more a collection of beliefs and practices revolving around the veneration of kami, spirits that inhabit all things, trees, rocks, mountains, even ancestors. Think of it like this: everything has the potential to be holy, touched by the divine. And you thought your house was messy. You noticed the meticulously raked gravel in the courtyard, each grain perfectly placed. Order is paramount in Shinto. It's a way of reflecting the harmony that should exist between humans and nature, a concept so crucial to understanding the entire philosophy. You approach the temazuya, the purification font, and with a ladle, cleanse your hands and rinse your mouth. A symbolic gesture of washing away impurities before approaching the kami. Don't worry, you don't actually have to use the same ladle everyone else used, just pretend. Germs are not sacred. Inside the Honden, the main sanctuary, you see no grand statues or elaborate icons. Instead, a simple mirror often serves as the shintai, the embodiment of the kami's presence. Historians still argue whether these mirrors are meant to literally reflect the deity or serve as a symbolic representation of self-reflection, encouraging worshippers to look inwards and recognize their own divine potential. Think of it as a really, really old selfie stick.
You toss a coin into the offering box, clap twice to get the kami's attention, because apparently, deities have trouble hearing, and bow your head in prayer. You can ask for anything: good health, success in your career, maybe even a winning lottery ticket, although, let's be honest, the odds are probably better if you just buy a lottery ticket. Shinto isn't about pleading or begging, it's about showing respect and gratitude to the kami for their blessings. One mainstream historical fact about Shinto is its close association with the Japanese imperial family. The emperor is traditionally considered a descendant of Amaterasu Amikami, the sun goddess, solidifying Shinto's role as the state religion for centuries. Fun fact, during World War II, Shinto was heavily nationalized, and the emperor was essentially used as a figurehead to rally troops. Now, for something a little quirky. Ever heard of Kokeshi dolls? Those simple wooden dolls with no arms or legs? While they're now popular souvenirs, some believe they originated as a form of folk magic, used to represent unborn children or as talismans for safe childbirth. Creepy? Maybe a little. But definitely interesting. As you leave the shrine, you feel a sense of tranquility wash over you. The gentle rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, the overall sense of peace, it's hard not to feel connected to something larger than yourself. But before you get too zen, remember that you still have laundry to do. Spirituality is important, but so is clean underwear. Your spiritual journey continues as you now step into a Buddhist temple, a stark contrast to the natural simplicity of the Shinto shrine. Here, the air is thick with the scent of incense, and the sounds of chanting fill the air. The temple architecture is imposing, reflecting the grand traditions of Buddhism, which arrived in Japan from Korea in the 6th century. Buddhism in Japan is a tapestry woven from various schools and traditions, each offering its own path to enlightenment. You might encounter Zen Buddhism, with its emphasis on meditation and mindfulness, or Pure Land Buddhism, which focuses on faith in Amitabha Buddha and the promise of rebirth in the Pure Land paradise. It's like a spiritual buffet, with something for everyone. You notice monks in saffron robes walking with deliberate steps, their faces serene. They are immersed in meditation, striving to quiet the mind and achieve a state of inner peace. You try to emulate them, sitting cross-legged on a cushion, closing your eyes, and attempting to empty your mind. But then you remember that awkward thing you said at that party 5 years ago, and all bets are off. Maybe enlightenment takes practice. One of the central tenets of Buddhism is the concept of karma, the idea that your actions have consequences, both in this life and in future lives. Think of it as the universe's way of keeping score. Do good things, and good things will happen to you. Do bad things, and, well, you get the idea. Don't be a jerk, basically. Inside the main hall, you see a massive statue of Buddha, its gold leaf shimmering in the candlelight. The statue emanates a sense of profound peace and wisdom. You offer a silent prayer, seeking guidance and compassion. It's a powerful moment, even if you're not entirely sure what you're praying for. Mainstream historical fact: Prince Shotoku, a regent during the Asuka period, 574 to 622, played a pivotal role in promoting Buddhism in Japan. He commissioned temples, wrote commentaries on Buddhist scriptures, and established Buddhism as a central pillar of Japanese culture. He was basically the Buddhist equivalent of a hype man. For a quirky tidbit, let's talk about Sokushinbutsu, self-mummified monks. In some remote mountain regions, monks would undergo a rigorous and painful process of self-mummification, gradually starving themselves and ingesting poisonous substances to achieve a state of living death. They believed this would bring them closer to enlightenment. Talk about dedication to your craft, though, some have questioned whether this could be categorized as suicide. Historians still argue whether the different schools of Buddhism in Japan represent fundamentally different philosophies or are simply variations on a common theme. Some argue that Zen Buddhism, for example, is a radical departure from traditional Indian Buddhism, while others maintain that it's simply a different approach to the same ultimate goal: liberation from suffering. It's the age-old debate: are we all just different flavors of the same ice cream, or are some flavors inherently superior? Chocolate, obviously. As you exit the temple, the sound of the chanting fades, and you're left with a lingering sense of calm. The blending of Shinto and Buddhism in Japan is a testament to the country's ability to absorb and adapt foreign influences, creating a unique and complex spiritual landscape. It's like a spiritual fusion cuisine, where the best elements of different traditions are combined to create something new and delicious. And hopefully, after all of this, you may find a moment of inner peace. Okay, so the sun's dipped below the rice paddies, hasn't it? Dipped like a clumsy sumo wrestler trying to do the limbo. You trudge wearily towards the small farmhouse, the minka, that's been your sanctuary for today. Honestly, you're pretty sure your back is about to stage a full-blown rebellion. Years spent in the fields have a way of doing that, you know? It's not exactly the kind of workout you see trending on Instagram, is it? Imagine the caption, just spent 12 hours planting rice. Hashtag peasant life, hashtag gains, hashtag maybe just pain. The air is cooling, thankfully, and you can smell the evening meal cooking, miso soup and maybe some pickled vegetables. Your stomach rumbles in anticipation. It's a simple fare, but after a day of back-breaking labor, it's ambrosia. Seriously, you'd probably fight a bear for a bowl of that soup right now. Not that there are bears around, usually. Unless you're in the more mountainous regions. Then, well, good luck with that. You might want to keep a pointy stick handy. Bears and all manner of wildlife can be found in the far-off mountains. What's that? Your house cat suddenly hates you? Well, good luck with that too, pal. Reaching the minka, you slide open the shoji screen, those delicate paper doors, and step inside. Ah, bless darkness and the promise of rest. Your family greets you with tired smiles. Even little Kenji, who usually greets you with a flying tackle of pure, unadulterated toddler energy, seems subdued. Which, honestly, is a relief. You drop your hoe near the Genkan, the entryway, and resist the urge to just collapse in a heap. Gotta maintain some semblance of dignity, right? You wash your hands and face with cool water from a basin. Feels good to get the grime off. You know, cleanliness was a surprisingly big deal in feudal Japan. Bathing wasn't just a practical necessity, it was almost a ritual. Some people would visit bathhouses daily, even though, let's be honest, sanitation wasn't exactly their strong suit back then. Sharing bathwater with a bunch of strangers? Eat. Dinner is a quiet affair. Everyone's too tired for much conversation. You slurp your miso soup with gusto, savoring the salty, umami flavor. Rice is a staple, naturally, and you're grateful for every grain. Funny to think that rice production was a massive deal back then, even influencing social structures. A samurai's wealth, for example, wasn't measured in gold or jewels, but in koku of rice, enough to feed one person for a year. So, basically, you could say you're eating someone's annual salary right now. Hope you enjoy it, buddy. After dinner, the family gathers around a small Andan lamp, its flickering light casting long shadows on the walls. Your mother starts to mend clothes, her nimble fingers working quickly and efficiently. Your father sharpens his tools, the rhythmic rasp of metal on stone a familiar and comforting sound. You help Kenji with his rudimentary writing practice, struggling to get him to form the correct strokes of the kanji. He's not exactly thrilled about it. Let's just say that calligraphy is not his passion. He probably has a future in, something other than calligraphy. Maybe professional mud pie making? Yeah, that sounds lucrative. Later, as the house quiets down, you decide to take a stroll in the garden. It's small, but meticulously maintained. A few carefully placed rocks, a gnarled pine tree, a small pond with koi carp lazily swimming about. It's all very zen. Speaking of Zen, the influence of Zen Buddhism was huge in feudal Japan, especially among the samurai class. They used meditation and mindfulness to hone their focus and discipline. You, on the other hand, are just hoping it helps you forget about the back pain. You sit on a stone bench, listening to the gentle chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. The moon hangs high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the landscape. It's peaceful. For a moment, you forget about the endless toil and the uncertainties of life. You just are. This is a rare instance that you get to think about your life beyond your means and it feels great, but quickly you are brought back to reality. And then your little brother yells at you for forgetting to close the gate. Then you head back inside, preparing for sleep. You roll out your futon on the tatami mat.
Tatami mats, made of woven rush, were the standard flooring back then.
They're surprisingly comfortable, though you wouldn't exactly call it a Tempur-Pedic. There were certainly some people that could do without that luxury. You change into your yukata, a light cotton robe, and lie down.
You blow out the Andon lamp, plunging the room into darkness.
The only light comes from the moon, filtering through the shoji screens. You close your eyes, but your mind is still racing. You think about the harvest, about the taxes you owe to the daimyo, about the rumors of war in the neighboring province.
It's never something good, right? Your taxes are already high and the daimyo demands more?
Well, that's just great. Historians still argue whether the daimyo were truly benevolent rulers or just glorified gangsters with really cool swords.
It's a tough call.
Some were certainly better than others. Then there's the whole issue of ninjas. Were they actually stealthy assassins who could scale walls and disappear into thin air, or were they just glorified spies and saboteurs? The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. Probably a bit of both, maybe even with a little help from some smoke bombs and creative storytelling.
You try to clear your mind, focusing on your breath. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale.
You imagine yourself as a serene mountain lake, undisturbed by the winds of worry.
Or maybe more like a slightly muddy puddle, but hey, baby steps, right?
There was the thought that you could rise above your situation.
Train and become a samurai.
That would be just the ticket, right?
But no. Samurai have to come from rich families. And you are no rich man.
And as you drift off to sleep, the sounds of the night become a lullaby. The croaking of frogs, the hooting of owls, the gentle snoring of your father in the next room. You are safe.
You are home. And tomorrow, you will wake up and do it all again. Wind down asterisk. The day is truly done now.
The worries, the labors, the tiny triumphs, they all fade into the tapestry of the night. Allow your breath to slow, to deepen, to become as soft as the moonbeams that paint patterns on the walls. Let the gentle rhythm of your heart be your guide, your anchor in this tranquil sea of slumber. The sounds of the night embrace you, a chorus of crickets, a whisper of wind through the trees, all singing you to rest. There is nothing more you need to do now, nothing more you need to think. Just let go. Let go of the day, let go of the world, let go of everything that holds you back from the sweet embrace of sleep. The futon cradles you, the darkness soothes you, and the promise of a new dawn awaits.
Rest now, dear listener.
Sink into the depths of slumber, and allow your mind to wander where it will, unburdened and free. The world will be here when you wake, but for now, there is only peace, there is only quiet, there is only sleep.
Sweet dreams.